Okay, what are you saying, people, and welcome back to my channel. Now today I've got another weekly analysis for you guys. So on the screen other pairs will be analyzed today, but make sure you stay to the end of the video because I will be going into depth analysis about what's happened during this week's trading week and potentially what could be happening during next week's trading week. So make sure you stay to the end of the video for all of that. But before that said, guys, let's just get straight into it. First up, we've got Euro USD. Okay, so first up we've got Euro USD. So for this pair, we saw another drive to the downside this week, which was expected. I did say last week, after rejecting our previous area of support and downturn resistance, I did say the market is probably likely to fall over to the downside, back to those lows, and maybe give us a lower low as well. And as you can see, previous support here, nice drive to the upside, nice drive to the downside, acting as resistance there again. And then last week, we were getting all these wicks, 1, 2, 3, 4, rejecting that area. So I did say this week, look for those sales because we're bound to roll over to the downside and just continue this bearish momentum from the previous week into this week. So the market is still quite bearish. You did see another push to the downside, nice wick there, almost into 1.18. I still think we can move lower though for Euro USD. So if I connect these previous major lower lows here in the market, so 1, 2, 3, just connect them with a trend line, you can see we've got a nice trend line there which we haven't tested yet. So I do think we want to come and test that area there maybe next week or maybe the week after, but I still do see more downside for Euro USD. So for next week, I do think we'll pull back to the upside of that bullish candle there, fairly to get closure below those lows. So I do see a move to the upside from another lower high, maybe a retest of that resistance as well. That's perfectly fine as long as we don't take out this resistance here, which is our last lower high. I still do see more downside for Euro USD. If we were to do that, then we might be looking at some upside before coming down. But right now, I think we just have a pullback and then the continuation lower. So for next week, can we look for some short-term buys if you want to trade the lower time frames? Some short-term buys do look not bad for Euro USD. If we were to hold this area of support, maybe some short-term buys forming us another lower high, and then from there we can look for sells targeting this trend line here, or at least that previous support or that previous low down there. But anyway, Euro USD, I still do see more downside. First, expecting a pullback to start the week off, maybe Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then the continuation on Thursday and Friday. But yeah, the market is still bearish on the daily and the weekly, so not really looking to buy Euro USD. And if I do, it's again for short term, not long term. So I still see this market rolling over to the downside. So expecting more downside for next week for Euro USD. Some new lows past this previous wick here, but first expecting a bit of a retrace for another lower high and then collapse to the downside. Next, we're going to take a look at USD JPY. Okay, so next up we've got USD JPY. So for this pair, as you can see, we had another drive to the upside this week. Again, I did say last week, expect more bullish momentum this week for USD JPY as we were creating those higher highs and higher lows previously. We were trading at this area of resistance, but last week I did say do expect to see a break of this resistance and market push on and keep those higher highs and higher lows going. As you can see, we're trading currently above that area, so it is going to be turned support now rather than resistance. So I did hand out a couple of targets for USD JPY if you were to move to the upside, which is this area of resistance here, which are those wicks. If I just take this across, you can see we actually did tap into this area on Thursday. So that was the first target, and second target is this previous high up here around the 112 mark. And I'll take that across. You can see we haven't actually quite hit that area yet. So I still do see more upside for JPY to go and tap that area. And right now, this strong area of resistance will now be acting as strong area of support. So for next week, if I drop that down to the 4H, you can see what happens in this area. See if we can hold this area as support, show signs of wicks, price rejecting that area, then we can be looking for buys, keeping on this higher highs, higher lows structure, another push into those previous highs. And if you can break through that, then we'll be targeting that resistance all the way up there. Bit of a trend line if I connect these recent lows here. But overall, the market for me is still very much bullish. So if we can get another test of that trend line, that'll be great as well, just adding to that confidence. But right now the market is still bullish. Big shift of bearish momentum, so I do expect to see the market fall to downside a little bit further on Monday. Just continue that momentum, and then if we do show signs of price holding, struggling to break through, then we can look for those buys, targeting that previous high first, and then if you can get a break, that resistance up there. But nonetheless, only looking for buys for next week for USD JPY. And next we've got USD CAD. Okay, so up next we've got USD CAD. So for this pair, we did find support here on the daily chart last week I did say it looks like the market is holding this area. Seeing numerous wick rejections into that area, so it looks like the market was holding. So we did anticipate some bullish momentum coming to the markets this week, and we did push up to the upside, but on Friday we did come crashing back down. So the market here is still overly bearish here on the daily. We're still making lower lows, lower highs. You can see we still have this bearish trend line still intact. We tested it a couple of times now, and price is still struggling to break through it. So for me, the market is still bearish, but it's important to see what happens at this price here, at this area here, to see whether we break through it or we hold, and then that will determine whether I look to buy or sell USD CAD. If you do look to hold this area, so come Monday or Tuesday when we tap into this area, see if we can hold it, and if we do hold it, then I will look for buys targeting again that trend line, and if you can get a breakout we can go much further. But if we don't and we actually break through that area of support, then the market I think is back turning bearish again here for the immediate price action. So probably waiting for some sell opportunities, then sell it back down back into this area here, prior resistance, and will be turned to support. And we also have not tested that area as well, so could be some fresh support that price might want to come back to go and revisit. So USD CAD, I can see some downside for this pair for this week, but it's important to see what happens around the 1.23 area. If we do hold 1.23, then yeah, buys do look good, targeting that trend line again. But if you break through, so we see a nice candle closure below, then yeah, wait for a bit of retracement and sell it back down into this area of support. So just keep an eye on what price action does here. Then either we're looking for buys back to the trend line or sells back to this resistance here. That'll turn support. Up next is Euro GBP. Sorry to interrupt the video, guys, but if you are enjoying the content and you're finding it useful, make sure you go hit the subscribe button down below, and also make sure you drop a like as well. It really does help the channel out. But anyway, back to the video. Okay, so next up we've got Euro GBP. So for this pair, not too much happened this week. I believe we finished last week around about this area, and as you can see, the market just kind of moved sideways since then. I was favoring a move to the downside last week, and I still am again this week. Price support here in the market, so nice push up, big push up as well. Now turn resistant, so I do see a move to the downside for Euro GBP from last week and again into this week, since nothing much has really happened this week. Again, targets will be this prior low here, so that's support, and then if you can break through that, I think we can tap into this previous low here on the daily all the way down there. So more downside for Euro GBP. Again, we're still holding on to this trend line here as well. Sort of had a bit of a breakout there, but not really a strong one, so not treating that as a breakout of the trend line, and still the trend line I'm treating that as intact. So looking for another move to the downside for Euro GBP. The only way I'll look for buys is if we have another push to the upside, closing above those wicks, closing above that resistance, and also closing above that trend line. Then yes, we might be having a breakout. Then on the retest of this area, you could probably look for some buys in the lower time frames and take that much higher. But right now we're still holding that trend line as resistance and still holding that level there as resistance, and really no real reason to be looking for buying opportunities. So we'll be looking for some sells for next week for Euro GBP. Haven't really gone anywhere this week, so we can be seeing a breakout this week potentially, and if that does happen, looking for a bit of retracement, then first target will be this support down there, and if we can get a break of that, we'll be targeting the 0.85 support there on the daily. So more downside next week for Euro GBP unless we get above that area. Okay, so up next we've got AUD USD. Okay, so next up we've got Aodu USD. So for this pair, again, as you can see, nice move to the downside. We did see some US dollar strength coming into these markets. I did say last week that we can be looking for some sells this week for Aodu USD. As you can see, price support, now turn resistance, that's 0.76 mark, very strong key level. As you can see last week, again, all these wicks here, and then as you can see, the momentum did continue to the downside this week. So for Aodu USD, I still expect more downside for Aodu USD. Again, we do have our targets around 0.74, this key area of resistance there on the weekly. So if I jump to the weekly quickly, you can see nice area of resistance down the weekly. I still do see us testing that area as support. Might see a bounce, might see price break. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it. But right now, still anticipating more downside for AUD. You can see on the weekly, we're also holding below that level there. So kind of extra confidence there from a daily and weekly point of view, looking for more downside. The market did close quite bullish down Friday. We did have an NFP come through, so I'm anticipating another push to the upside. giving us another lower high, maybe a double top, testing that 0.76 level again, and then we can look to short the pair again to the downside, and we'll be targeting that 0.74 area. Unless we get above this area, if we get above 0.76 and start holding above that and start treating that level as support, then I might change my bias, and we could be seeing maybe another push up for a bit more retracement, because we did have a big dive to the downside a couple of weeks ago. So we could technically still push up, retrace some of that move, and then collapse to the downside. So that is still a possibility, but right now we're holding strong underneath 0.76, so anticipating a bit of a pullback to the upside, and then we'll look to short the pair. If we go into the 4H, you can see a nice strong reaction there. So if you were to come back up, retest that, come back down, or might not even come all the way, might come to this area here, strong area of supply there, might tap into that 0.75 600 area and then fall, but nonetheless looking for selling opportunities next week. First target will be the previous low here, and then 0.74 down there. But anyway, more downside for next week for AUD as long as we stay below 0.76.
Now let's take a look at NZD CAD.
Okay, so next up we've got NZD CAD. So for this pair, as you can see, not much momentum in this pair recently. A lot of wicks all over the place here on the daily time frame. We did see a move to the downside this week, which was expected. Again, we were holding onto this area here. I did say that was the lower high, so if the market was to maintain bearish, we should reject this area and fall back down, and as you can see, that did happen. We haven't come back to these previous lows here. We're finding support around this area here. As you can see, 1, 2, 3 drives into that area, and the market is still rejecting it. So it does look like we might be seeing another push higher for NZD CAD to start the week off. But if the market was to still stay bearish, we should still reject this area and collapse back to the downside. So we might be seeing a bit of a range for NZD CAD next week between this support 0.86400 and this resistance around 0.87100. So again, NZD CAD probably not the most attractive pair to trade next week, but we could maybe see some nice opportunities of buying at support and selling at resistance, and just taking advantage of that range if it was to form. But for now, it does look like the market is rejecting this area, and we could be seeing another drive into that resistance. And if we do see some nice strong rejection like we did previously, again, some good sells could be forming back into that support. Unless we just see a breakout, then we might be seeing some upside for NZD CAD, but right now we're not really seeing much of that in the market. So I'm thinking the drive to the upside, price might fall down, but if it does break out, then we could look for some buys. But if it doesn't, then some good sells back into that previous support, and just continue at a bit of a range there for NZD CAD for next week.
Next up, we've got GBP NZD.
Okay, so for GBP NZD, we did see a bit of retracement, and now it looks like we're getting some continuation to the downside this week. I did point out this key level here of resistance here on the daily time frame. Looking at these recent highs here, so 1, 2, 3, bit of a false breakout. This will come back and actually have retested that area as resistance, struggled to break through. So I am seeing some downside here for GBP/NZD. Last week I did say we could potentially get a test of this trend line if that bearish momentum was to keep up, and yeah, as you can see, it is still keeping up. We had a bit of retracement the first half of the week, and then the continuation the second half. So yeah, for GBP/NZD, I still see we can get a test of this trend line here, connecting those major lows and some more downside. So for next week, again, only really looking for sells. Right now, NFP did take the market quite down quite aggressively on Friday there to that previous low. So I'm seeing a bit of retracement, and then we can be looking for some continuations back down into that support, and if you can break through that, we can look to target the trend line down there around the 1.95 mark. So only really looking for sales for GBP/NZD. If we do move quite high up, I think it's just retracement, as long as we kind of stay below this area of resistance on this 4H and that daily as well. I still will be looking for sales, targeting this support here 1.96, then if we can get a break 1.95. but for next week, only looking for sales, expecting more downside for GBP/NZD.
Next, we're going to move on to CAD JPY.
Okay, so next up we've got CAD JPY. So for this pair, we did see a nice move to the downside early on in the week. I did say the market looks like it's finding resistance here, so we should be seeing a move lower, struggling to push higher. We should see a move lower, and as you can see, that's exactly what happened. However, the second half we did drive back to the upside, back into that same resistance. So for me, I still got that bearish bias. We still haven't broken structure, so I still do anticipate another move higher, but this is potentially a higher low, and if the market was to turn bullish, I want to see a nice strong daily close above this area, breaking through that resistance. So on the retest, we can probably look to go long and then target previous highs there for CAD JPY. back at the 91,200 area. So buys could be on for next week for CAD JPY, but if we do hold this as resistance, so we see Monday or Tuesday reject this area, then we can be looking for sales again, because this potentially could be a double top here. This potentially could be a double top, and then we can see the market collapse, come back into this area of support here. So still waiting on a bit more development there. We'll be monitoring price action in that area early on next week, see what happens, see if we reject it, or see if we are breaking through. And if you do break through, then buys are on to fill in this gap here, this range here, or around 80 pips to the upside, back to highs. But if we don't and reject it again, so we see similar price action that we saw last week again here, then sales could be on again. We'll be targeting this support down here on the 4H, and then if you can break through that, we'll be targeting this support all the way down there. So buyers currently is the downside as long as we stay underneath this level. If we do break it, then switch to bullish, and then we'll be targeting this highs up there.
Up next is GBP USD.
Okay, so next up we've got pound USD. So for this pair, we did see another drive to the downside this week. I did say last week that we did reject 1.4 quite well, so we should see some new lows this week past 1.38, which is this key area of support, and a push back down to 1.37, which is this support down here. As you can see, we didn't quite get there. We kind of got a bit of a false breakout of 1.38, so we closed below on Thursday. Then Friday took us back above, so a bit of a false breakout there. So I am seeing some upside to start the week off of GBPUSD. We might push back up, form another lower high, then another drive lower. And if we can hold below 1.38, then I do see 1.37 getting tested. You can see here on the weekly chart, overall the market is still very, very bearish here. Very strong shift in momentum back to the bears here after this nice bull run. Failure to break through the previous high, so I am anticipating the market filling in this gap, pushing back into that support down there. But again, like I said, we had a little bit of a false breakout of that area, so naturally I do expect to see a move higher first to start the week off, but then I do expect to see the market find the resistance and then fall back again to the downside. And if you can hold 1.38, then we could be looking for some nice shorts on the retest of that. So later in the week, if we do break through this and hold that as resistance, some nice shorts will form in the lower time frames, and we can take advantage of the market just simply filling in that range. So GBUSD does look good for some short-term buys to the upside, but again, I wouldn't hold on for too long. So I think it's just going to be retracement for another move lower. So GBUSD, my bias is still to the downside as long as we hold below 1.4, and any move we see to the upside is most likely just to be retracement and another opportunity for us to stick some sales in. So GBUSD start of the week, I think we'll see some nice bullish momentum. You can see NFP to give us a nice start to the upside there, so a bit of retracement, continuation higher. Then if you do find some resistance, maybe around 1.39 level, then we could be looking for some shorts and then take that back down, targeting this support. And if we can get a break, then targeting that support all the way down there.
And next we're going to see what's happening with GBP CAD.
And now we've got GBP CAD. So for GBP CAD, as you can see, we've got a nice move to the downside this week. Again, I did say after that nice strong closure to the downside that we had last week down the daily and on the weekly as well, nice strong engulfing candle, was expecting to see the market push to the downside. You can see on the weekly, we are still bearish here, push, pull back, push, pull back, push. Still treating this as a pullback, so expecting another push to the downside. On the daily chart, again, we did see that continuation the second half of the week. We're currently still trading at this support here, and I do expect to see the market push eventually back down to this support there. Might not happen by the end of next week, but maybe in a couple of weeks time we should be trading around that area if the market does follow the price action here. For opportunities, we'll be waiting for a bit of retracement back up again, and then we'll look to take this back down, just because again, strong area of support. You can see it did hold all this price action here, gave us a move to the upside, so I do expect this area to act as a little bit as a barrier for price early on, but then I do expect price to eventually go and break through that and see price push back down to these previous lows. So two opportunities: can wait for a bit of retracement, then take it down, or probably the safe opportunity might wait, just wait for a break of that support, wait for price to come back up, retest it, and push back down again on the lower time frame. So either way, looking for shorts for pound CAD for next week, targeting 1.68 500, which is this low here, and if you do see new lows, might be around the 1.68 mark. So GB CAD push to the upside. We're going to 4H. You can see, did see that nice momentum, so maybe back into this area around here. a pull back into that area, maybe around 1.71, push back down into that support, looking for the break, and then on the retest kind of to get involved again and target 1.68500.
Okay, up next we've got GBP JPY.
Okay, so this week we did see some downside here for pound JPY. As you can see, we did see some continuation. However, later on the week, we kind of retraced that and had a hard time moving to the downside after that. As you can see, a bit of retracement, and we had a bit of consolidation really there. So overall, pound JPY, a little bit unclear there on the 4H, but my bias is still to the downside. We still did make that lower high there last week. So again, as long as we stay below that, I am still treating that as a bearish market here on the daily and looking for some downside. On the higher time frames, we are kind of still bullish here, so it does contradict itself a little bit, but I do think if we do stick with the daily price action, we can see another push back down to these lows. And if you do hold this low, we might see some upside, but if we don't break through, then the weekly might be turning bearish as well with it. So right now, looking for sells for pound JPY. I want to see a bit of retracement first and then take it back down again, because right now the market isn't moving as cleanly. Maybe back to this previous lower high around here, around the 1.4 area, retest that area, then we can be looking for some sells. And again, like I said, targeting that previous support down the daily around the 151,500 area. So shorts for next week for pound JPY, might see a bit of retracement to the upside first. Looks like we are having this kind of bull flag formation here on the 4H. So as you can see, nice push, retracement, another push, see if you can reject that area, and if we do, looking for shorts back down to 151,500 and potentially some new lows after that as well.
And up next, we're going to take a look at gold.
Okay, so next up we've got gold. So for gold this week, as you can see, we did have a drive to the downside this week. The market was failing to break through this resistance. We did have a bit of a range here in the market, so clear resistance there, clear support here as well. We broke to the downside, gave us some new lows. However, we did see some bullish momentum come to the markets after that, and you can see why on the daily, because we do have this clear area of support and very strong support as well. So if I do zoom out, you can see a nice big move to the upside there, nice move there, and another big move to the upside. So we're still hanging on to that area, and after that big collapse we had the other week for gold, I do see some upside for price to retrace some of that move and then the continuation lower. I do still see price breaking through this support here, 1770, to push back into 1680, this support all the way down there. But right now I think we're in retracement mode, so a bit bullish momentum to the upside, and then later on we might collapse later on in the month. But right now the market is kind of bullish here, or trying to be bullish anyway. We're kind of stuck in that resistance, so we do need to see maybe a nice strong close above that, and then we can look for some continuation, or a little bit more aggressive, we can wait for another drive lower for gold, failure to break through, give us another formation of a higher low, and then we can look to drive back into that resistance and then potentially a lot higher. And the area where I do see price retracing to for gold is this area here around 1815, nice area of supply where we did see a big shift of momentum to the downside. So I think we could tap into that level, maybe come down, or maybe even higher, then come down. But the market still does need to retrace, and we're still holding on to that very key level of support. So with that confluence together, I do see maybe a move lower, and then we can look for buys. Again, want to target this resistance here first, because again, it is rejecting price quite well, and if we can get a break of that, probably hold into that position a little bit longer, target this area, then from here might be a nice area if we do turn bearish to look for sells, targeting again that support there, because I do still see gold pushing down to fill in that gap all the way back down to 1680. But again, that probably might take 2 or 3 weeks to occur, so not really looking for sells immediately here for gold, but I do think a drive to the downside, and then we could look for some buys.
And last but not least, we've got Bitcoin.
Okay, so next up we've got Bitcoin. So Bitcoin, not too much happened this week. We did see another drive higher. Again, we do have this key area of resistance here for Bitcoin. I did say on the 4H last week that it does look like the market might drive higher since we were failing to push lower. We did see a nice drive higher back into that area, did break above it, now we're back below it, holding in resistance. So Bitcoin here a little bit on the choppy side of things. As you can see, price action isn't clearish. On the weekly time frame, we do have a key area of support, as you can see here, numerous wicks below 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and if this week closes like that again, we'll probably have a 7. So on the weekly time frame, we're clearly struggling to break through that support, so we might be seeing another move higher. But again, for that to happen, we do need to get back above this key area of resistance around 35,000. So currently the market is having another test of that area. If we can see another strong close above, like here we did have a bit of a false breakout, so you can see a strong close above, and rather than seeing false breakout, we see the market come back, retest and hold as support, and some buys could be happening for Bitcoin back to this previous resistance up here, and maybe just continue this overall range here for Bitcoin, with this area here being the resistance, support, sorry, and that area being the resistance up there. So the market for Bitcoin is moving sideways. Weekly we are finding support starting to break through numerous wicks below, and if we can get above 35,000, start holding as support again. As you can see, we were getting some nice drives to the upside from 35,000, so if that was to happen, then we can be looking for some buys back to that 40,000 area. So Bitcoin could be on for some buys. If we don't break through that area of resistance, I think we're back on for some sells, because that will now be acting as strong resistance, and probably see another drive back into the lows around 31,000. So Bitcoin, look at what happens with this area, see if we can hold or break through, and then that will determine the buys for Bitcoin. Right now it's still holding resistance, so sells, but if we can break above, then we'll be turned bullish again, hold as support, wait for the retest, and then we could be looking for some longs back up to 40k.
Okay, so that is the end of the video, guys. I hope you all enjoyed that and found that useful. Like always, guys, if you have any questions, agree or disagree with my analysis, drop a comment down below, let me know, and I'll make sure I'll get back to you. Make sure you hit the subscribe button as well, and drop a like if you're feeling generous. But anyway, guys, thank you again for watching, and until the next one, I'll catch you guys later.